Okay. Zok the Heilige Gemara. We're all the way at the bottom of Yud item base, and the Gemara is discussing the reason why Chazal made a rule that every get has to have a zman is so that it would avoid one of two problems. According to Rabbi Yochanan, if a girl was mezana and the husband wanted to save her life, for instance, she was his niece, he would give her a get without a date, and she would claim that she was migureshes before she was mezana. Therefore, you should have a date on the get. The reason that Rish Lakish gave is because she wants to be able to collect back any pairs that her husband ate from her nichsim aluk, and she's only allowed to collect back pairs that he ate from the nichsim aluk after she was divorced. And she needs to prove when she was divorced in order to be able to make that collection. So it's those two reasons that we have this halacha of zman beget. So Frek the Gemara, Omer le Ravina lerova. Ravina asked Rava the following question: how is it that this takana helps? What would happen if Kosvei, he wrote a get, let's say on January 1st, 2023, but he kept it there for safekeeping. He said, I'm going to hold on to the get because it's get to Huben. It's good to have a get around just in case I need it. But he didn't give it to her. He held it on, he held it. And now he can give it to her anytime he wants. The kisses, he kept it in his pocket. The imafaisa tafayis. So if they would make up, he wouldn't give her the get. And if not, he would give her the get. So now he has a get that's dated many moons ago. We might be in February, March of 2023. The get was dated for January 2023. Should his wife be mizana, he could still give her this get, and it'll be predated, so it will save her. Or she can collect from Paris from an earlier time than the get. So how does the takana help to prevent this? Omer Lei, Rava answered, no one would ever have a get in their possession if they weren't actually going to do the get right away. Because lemaktim inish puranusal nafshe. And as Rashi says, people wouldn't do something like that, to hold in his pocket a get. The kivin since he's not really sure he wants to do a get, it's a peranis. He's not going to try to have a peronius by him if not necessary. So we don't need to worry he's going to do that. Omele Ravin Ravashi, well, what about a different type of get? Gittin haboyim medina sayam. A get that comes from overseas. They didn't have air transportation in those days. So a get could have been written in January and signed in January, and it won't be delivered until maybe 6 months later because of the time it takes to travel there. The michtav even nissen, they could have been written in nissen, yet they won't arrive to be given to the woman until Tishrei, meaning the get will only happen in Tishrei. What good is their whole takana if you can write a get and have it around for such a long time? Right off the bat, it circumvents the solution regarding znus, and it circumvents the solution regarding the pairs. Amar lei, so Rav Ashi answered, Hanu kala islahu. Whenever they send the get from far away, the get has a coil. And as Rashi says, what type of coil does it have? Dr. Rashi, uvein le'inyan znus, uvein le'inyan peiris, boy lasu yiraya, emes moti gitaliyada. Since it's known that the date written on the get is surely not the date that the get was given because it's from far away, she would need to bring a raya. If she wanted to collect pairs with this get that's dated 6 months in the past, dated Nisan, she would have to bring a raya with Edim Asira when she actually got the get, and only then will we let her collect pairs. What's very difficult to understand is, it's Mashi from Rashi that in Znus as well, meaning that she would have to bring a raya that she was divorced before this Znus. Otherwise she'd get killed. That's very schwer, because if they're trying to be Mechaya from Esau, they have to prove that she was not Migureshes at the time, Why is the onus on her to prove that she was Megareshes at the time? So Tosfos asks this kasha. It's the second Tosfos on the Amid, and Tosfos also asks another very important kasha, and that is, if the whole reason why, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you need to have the date and the get is so that you should be able to kill a girl who's mezana, well, that's great when they had the Sanhedrin. But what about nowadays, where there is no such thing as Mises Besdin? Why now do we still need to have Zman on a get? So Zot Tosfos, Pirish B'Kuntris, the boila suyi raya amos mata gita. This woman would have to bring a raya when she got to get. Otherwise, we'll assume that she was mezan and she's chayv misa. Tema freit Tosfos, the leinians nus, the nehidi yadua shaloi bola yada b'yem hakasav boy. Okay, we know surely she didn't get the get in her hands the day that it's dated. But because Makam Yachal Achbois, Veloimar Shanasan law, Kodim Shinzinsa. To my Kodim Shintiknuzman. He could still say that he gave it to her earlier. He can't say I gave it to her in Nisan when it was written, but he can say I gave it to her in Iyar, in Sivan, or in Tammuz, which are all days that would have been before her Zmus. So once again, it circumvents the whole Takana of Zman. Why Marie Zakaria big Chiddush. Kala Islahu Kishiroyan Bizman Shizman Aksiva Hikodim Hamasira. The coil is such that if the Edom that watch the Masira see that the date on the get is so much earlier than the day that the Masira is actually occurring, is lekala lemilsa umaska datayu leda yom Masira. The coil won't just be a coil that the get was not given on the day that it was dated, but the coil will actually have accurate information as to the day that the get was given. So since we have that accurate information, we'll be able to kill her if, in fact, the znus occurred before the get was given. Why is it that they were misakin zman on such a get? If a get comes to Medina Sayyam, where the date on the get means nothing, and all that matters is the day that she got the get, so why does that get need to have a date on it at all? There'll only be a coil about when the get was actually given if there's a date stamped on that get, which we know is not the day that it was given. So then that controversy will create a coil as to when the get was actually given. It was obvious from the date on the get that the Nesina had to be at a later date. Only then will there be a coil that would be accurate to determine what day she actually got to get. If the reason is basa choisha, like Rabbi Yochanan said, nowadays where we don't have any Mrs. Bezdin, lama koshvin zman begittin. Why in the world do we need a zman begittin? And Tosfos says we have a right from a Mishnah that even nowadays we have the chiyuv and the takana to put a date on the get. V'yesh shleimer, and for Tosfos, gzeira shemiyechba al bonei al mamzeir. You're right, we can't kill her, but we still need to determine if she was mazana or not. Because if she had children from this illegal bia, in fact, they would be mamzeir, and we need to isolate them so that they shouldn't marry into Klal Yisrael. That's one purpose of the Zman Beget. Inami, another purpose is Mehera Yibane Beis HaMikdash. We're hoping the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt soon, so we have to maintain the minig because then it will be relevant. Inami, or a third reason, is Shalayoimru Zinza Achar Gerushin. We're afraid that if we don't know when she was Mazana, so let's think about it. If she was Mazana before the Gerushin, her husband can never take her back. But if she was Mazana after the Gerushin, the husband could take her back, because one is only prohibited to be Machshir Grushasoi if she remarried somebody else with a Kedushin. But if, with a Kedushin and a Nesuin, but if she only was Mazana, that would not prohibit her first husband from marrying her back. So therefore, we really need to know if she was Mazana or not. And therefore, because the Gerusha Shezitza Muteres Lachsa. So those are three good reasons why, even though nowadays there's no such thing as Mrs. Bezdin, we still need a date on the get. Beautiful. Zogt der Heilige Gemara weiter. Itmar. We know there's a rule that if a woman is divorced from her husband, she's not allowed to remarry right away. She has to wait 3 months. So that just in case she's pregnant from her first husband, within 3 months, we'll know that. And then we'll know who the father of the child is. But if she gets married right away and then she has a baby 9 months later, we won't necessarily know who is the father of this child. So because of that, there's a 3-month moratorium on her getting married after a get. When does the clock start to tick on this get? Rav Amar Mishas Nasina. Rav said from the time that she's legally divorced, which is when she receives the get. Shmuel Amar Mishas Ksiva. Even before she actually receives the get, from the date on the get already, we'll make an assumption that there's not going to be relations. So therefore, we can start the clock ticking the moment the get was written, even before she received. Maskif law, Rab Nosson bar Hoshia l'Shmuel. Rab Nosson asked the problem. According to Shmuel, that it's based on the ksiva of the get, you can technically have 2 women who separated from their husband on the same day, yet one woman will be mutter to remarry after 2 months, and the other woman will only be mutter to remarry after 3 months. And what would be the case? 2 women in one chatzar. In other words, they were both the wives of the same man. Zu asura, zu muteres. One will be asur, one will be muter. What is precisely the case? So Rashi tells us, Beis noshim b'chatzar echos. Shel odom echad shepirish liyam. Somebody was going on a long business trip, and not to make his wives agunas, he left them both gittin. Umasar shnei gittin l'shnei noshav by b'yoyin. The day he left on his trip, he left each of his wives a get. But the date on each of the gittin were different. For one get, he wrote it the day he left, but the other get he had already written a month before. But he handed them over to his wives both on the same day, the day that he left. Shmuel, according to Shmuel, where the clock starts to tick, the moment the get was written, now this woman whose get is predated by a month can get remarried 2 months later because she already has a head start of a month. The Zul, but the woman whose get was dated today, L'Sayv Gimel. And that's a little problem because Yitmo b'nei Adam sheros in the people are going to look at it like it's strange. If they both got divorced on the same day, why is this woman allowed to remarry after 2 months, yet this other woman has to wait 3 months? And according to Shmuel, that's how it will be. According to Rav, it's from the Shas HaNasina. So both of these women have to wait 3 months. But according to Shmuel, it wouldn't be even. Zok Shmuel, that's not a problem. You know why? Amar le Abaye answered, Zuzman Gita Mechiach Alei, Zuzman Gita Mechiach. The fact that there's a date in the get will make it that people won't be surprised why there's a difference. Because they'll understand. Her get was written earlier, and her get was written later. It's not going to cause any wonder, any concern by anyone. Tanya Kavasei de Rav. We have a brisa that supports Rav that it's from the day you count 3 months from the day of the Nesina, and Tanya Kavasei de Shmuel that you're counting 3 months from the day of the Ksiva. Tanya Kavasei de Rav. It says as follows: if someone sent a get to his wife through a shliach, but it took the shliach 3 months to arrive at the destination to turn over the get to the wife. The halacha is so even though the date of the get is 3 months earlier, the clock does not start to tick until she gets that get. Now, there's another concern here that would make the get possible, which is a get yasha. The halacha is if someone writes a get for his wife, and before he gives it to her, he is miyachid with her, he secludes himself with her, we're choshid that they had relations, and therefore the get is possible. Why is the get possible? Just because we're choshid she had relations, he can give a get anyway, even though he had relations with her. The problem is, what if she became pregnant at that time? Okay, if she became pregnant at that time, and then the get is given, the fact of the matter is when people see the date on the get, they're going to think that she got the get on the day that it was dated. Yet, we know she got pregnant later. So people are going to think that this woman has a child of an illegitimate relationship. There might not have been a chiv misa, she might have been a pnuya, but still, this baby was born out of wedlock. We don't want that to happen. So therefore, if he's miyached with her, the get is disqualified. And if he wants to give her a get, he'd have to give her a new get with a later date. So here, where there was a 3-month gap, we're not worried about get Joshua. You know why? The only time we're worried about a get Joshua is if we know for a fact that they secluded together. But here, we have no reason to believe that they secluded together, and therefore, the get is kosher. Nevertheless, the clock doesn't start to tick until she actually receives the get. That was the raya to Rav. And now the raya like Shmuel. Tanya Kavasa to Shmuel that the clock starts ticking as soon as the get is written. Because it's a mashal get leishtori, someone gave a get to a third party, and he told the third party, well, on my loy, I'll titneu law, don't give my wife this get until 3 months pass. Mishanasnu law, the moment she acquires the get, muteres lunasamiyad. She can get married right away. Clearly, this is like Shmuel, because the 3 months passed since she wrote the get, although she just got it. Nevertheless, we say that she can get married right away, because we assume they didn't have relations. We'll get Yoshan in Choshen, and the same thing, we're not Choshen for a get Yoshan. So now we have a machlokes. A get that a woman waits 3 months, is it from when she receives the get, or is it from when the get was written? Rav Kana, Rav Papa, Rav Ashi of the Mishas Ksiva. They paskin like Shmuel. Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Rav Yeshua of the Mishas Nasina. The Hilchos of Mishas Ksiva, Halacha L'Maisa, we paskin like Shmuel. Gewaltig. Itmar, the Gemara is a shayla. May Mosai Ksuba Mashmeres. Now we know the halacha is if you have a chayiv, if anybody owes you money, or if you owe anybody else money, and Shemitah passes, the halacha is they cannot mond that chayiv anymore. Shemitah is mishamet chayivs. At what point does the ksuba becomes like a regular chayiv? That Shemitah will be mishamet. Because the ksuba itself is a t'nai bezdin, that's not subject to the Shemitah. However, at a certain point, after the ksuba became mechuyev to be paid after the divorce, at a certain point we look at it like a regular chayv, and it would be mishamet. So at what point do we look at it that way? So technically, if someone wants to divorce his wife and get out of paying ksuba, he could divorce his wife right before the Shemitah year, and then delay till the end of the Shemitah year, and then he doesn't have to pay anything. So let's see what the Gemara says. Rav Omar, Mishativkoim v'sizkoim. 2 things have to occur. Tivkoim means he has to start paying it back a little bit. Since he's starting to pay back, he made a down payment, he paid some money towards it. That shows like it's a regular chayv now, because he's already starting to pay it down. But in addition to that, you need tizkoif. What tizkoif is, the Gemara is going to explain shortly, that it means once she takes him to Bezdin and to collect her ksuba, and Bezdin says, yes, you must pay, at that point it becomes a chayv. So 2 things have to happen. Bezdin must tell him, okay, it's triggered, now you must pay, and then he has to pay a couple of dollars. Now it's like a regular chayv, and if Shemitah passes, he no longer has to pay back. Ushmul Amar, Pagama or Pagma, Ava Bishla Zakva, even if you didn't go to Bezdin yet, but if you merely paid off some of it, that's enough that it's transferred into a regular chayv, or Zakva Ava Bishla like Pagma. Or once they went to Bezdin, and Bezdin said, you owe her the money, pay up. Even if he hasn't paid anything yet, it's already considered a chayv. Tanya Kavasa the Rav, Tanya Kavasa the Shmuel. We have brises that support either opinion. Tanya Kavasa the Rav, that you need 2 things, both tivkoim and tiskoim. Meimasai ksuba mishametes misha tivkoim v'tiskoim. If pagma v'loi zakva or zakva v'loi pagma, enu mishametes acha tivkoim v'tiskoim. Clearly, like Rav, both things have to occur before the ksuba transfers over into a regular chayv. But Tanya Kavasa the Shmuel. Now remember, Shmuel said one or the other, either Zakaf or Pogam, will make it into a regular chayv. The raya that we're bringing from this brisa will actually only prove that Zakifa does it, but not Pegima, as we'll see shortly. Oynis, Uknas, Upito, Yuksubazisha. These are all payments that are levied against people from Bezdin, from a Knas, but it's all done by Bezdin. So they're not yet loans. But Shezak from the Milva, after there was a Hamad Bedin, and Bezdin said, yes, you have to pay that Knas. Yes, you have to pay that Pitoy. Yes, you have to pay that Ksubazisha. It's now already considered a Milva, and therefore Mishamtin. But if Bezdin didn't yet say you must pay, Ein Mishamtin. What is Niskafin? Me'emes Niskafin, like we said, B'milva Mishas Hamad Bedin. When the parties go to the Torah, and Bezdin Paskins, yes, you have to pay the Knas, or you have to pay the Ksuba, or whatever it was, now it's a regular Chayv. Even though you didn't start paying it yet. So this is a raya to Shmuel that just Zakifa Bedin is enough to make it into a regular Chayv, although we don't have a brisa that says the other thing, that Pegima itself would make it into a Chayv. Amar Shmuel said, Suba Kamaisa Bezdin. Suba is similar to Maisa Bezdin. It's not like a regular Shtar Chayv. A regular Shtar Chayv, if it was written by day and dated by day and only signed off by the Edom at night, it's considered a Shtar Muktim because the date on the Shtar is earlier than when the Shtar took effect because the Edom didn't sign till tonight. That problem would not apply to a Maisa Bezdin, such as Ksuba. So Dr. Gemara, Ksuba Kamaisa Bezdin Dam. Ma Maisa Bezdin Nechtavim B'yoyim V'Nechtamim B'Layla. Just like any Maisa Bezdin could be written by day and signed at night, Av Ksuba Nechteves B'yoyim V'Nechtemes B'Layla. When you, by a very regular chasana, but if the Kabbalah's Panim is straddling Shkia and they wrote up the Ksuba by day, and by the time it was signed, it was nighttime, that's not a problem at all. Why not is a problem? Why is it not a problem? Zokt Rashi, it's not a problem because it's not the chasima that creates the chiyuv of the ksuba. It's the Tanai Bezdin that does that. That happens by the ksiva. That has nothing to do with the chasima. The chasima is just a witness that this occurred. But what actually creates the chiyuv, unlike in the Shtar Milva, that the Edom HaChasum and Shtar create the coil, and that creates the shibud by a Bezdin, such as a Chiv Ksuba, the Chiv occurs right away when it's written. And therefore, there's no concern if they signed at night. Zok Gemara, Ksubase de Rab Chia bar Rav, Ichtav b'yom v'Ichtav b'layla. In fact, Rab Chia bar Rav's Ksuba was written by day and it was signed at night. Have a Rav Osam, Rav was there by his son's wedding, and he didn't have any problem with it. So it seems it must be Rab must agree to Shmuel that Ksuba is like a Tnai Bezdin, and it doesn't matter if the shtar is predated. Zok Gemara, no. What happened by Reb Chia bar Rav's wedding, even if it would have been a regular shtar choy, it would also be kosher if it was signed in the evening after it was written. Why? Because it was a sukin ba'is Indian happen. They didn't write the ksuba and then abandon it and then come back later to sign. They were handling the whole time. A shtar choy would be the same thing. If a Malvin, a Loiva, and the Edom are handling and discussing this loan, and the discussion and the writing of the shtar was before night, and the discussion continued and extended into the night, and then the Edom signed, even by a milva, that wouldn't be a problem. If it's a sukkah ba'isa inyan. So Zok Gemara, by the case of Rav, you don't have a Rai Yosy like Shmuel, because maybe it was a sukkah ba'isa inyan haba, the Tanya Amar Balaza Barab Tzadik, Lashanu Elakashena sukkah ba'isa inyan. Sukkah ba'isa inyan kosher. The question is, why is a regular shtar kosher? It wasn't signed till the nighttime. Zok Rashi, very important, Sharei Mishas Ksiva Nami Islekala. When you handling in a shtar, we said that it's the Edom that make the coil. True, the Edom allow this conjunction to have a coil, but the coil already would be there during the ksiva already. That whole maimed creates a coil. And therefore, the coil, we say, would have happened already, Shasta ksiva, and we don't consider it a pre-dated shtar. Beautiful. Now we're going to go back to the Mishnah. Although the Mishnah said that according to the Chachamim, if a get is predated even by 1 day, the get is possible. Reb Shimon argued. And Reb Shimon said a get that has a date that's dated 1 day before the Edom signed is kosher. Omar Rava, my time of Reb Shimon. Why does Reb Shimon know this kosher? The teretz is kasavar kivin shenasan einav lagasho shuv ein loy peiros. We learned earlier that according to Reb Shimon, the reason has nothing to do with Shema Yechbal Basachoisoi. It's not a news problem. The whole problem is that if you predate the get, she's going to collect peiros from the time of from the date that's written on the get, when really she's only entitled to take peiros from the chasima, which would have been a day later. But and that's as far as the Tanakama. But Reb Shimon holds that when a man loses the peiros of his wife's nichsa maluk, even before he divorces her, as soon as he decides that he wants to divorce her, from then on he can no longer take peiros. Reb Shimon holds even shenasan einav lagasho shuv ein lo peiros. Now she can't prove when he decided to divorce her, but as soon as he wrote that get, even before it was signed, therefore sure we know he wanted to divorce her. Maybe he wanted to divorce her even earlier, but she at the least has proof to that date, the date that the get was written on, that he wanted to divorce her, and it's from that point on that the husband's not entitled to peiros. And therefore, there's no reason to be concerned about a shtar that was signed after it was dated, because the date of the shtar is enough that she should lawfully be able to claim back the peiros. Amar Rish Lakish said, Lo yichshir Reb Shimon el alter. That Reb Shimon said a get that was signed the day after it was written, it means if it was just signed 1 day later. But if you waited 10 days to sign it, loy. There, even Reb Shimon would agree that that's a pasul get. Why? What's the concern? So let's turn over onto Amud Beis. Dr. Gemara, the reason for this is Chayshinan Shema Pais. We're afraid that the husband changed his mind and he didn't want to give her get anymore. And therefore it's no longer a kosher get, because Rashi says we're afraid that he actually had bia with her, and that would make it into a get yosha. Tosfos says you don't need that svar. Tosfos says we're afraid that he was mevatel the shlichus because he no longer wants to get. And Tosfos says this chashin semapayis only applies if the Edom hadn't signed. And that's why if the Edom signed 10 days later, in those 10 days, since the Edom hadn't signed yet, the husband's not 100% sure he could have changed his mind. But once Edom signed it, even though the get was delivered much later, like if it came from Medina Sayyam, there we're not worried about payis. Only worried about payis if the Edom didn't sign, because you see, he's not 100% yet until they sign. But Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu mikan bar asar yom. That Rabbi Shimon is matir, he's matir no matter what, no matter how much later than the date of the get the Edom signed is not a concern at all. You know why? Because in Isa the Pious, you're suggesting we're concerned that he changed his mind. The neighbors for the last 6 months have been hearing screaming and fighting and dishes smashing and windows breaking, and suddenly it's calm in the house. Everyone's going to know they must be getting along again. And therefore, if we don't need to worry about Shema Pais, because everybody would know if that was true. Itmar, the Gemara has a machlekes. What happens? Omar la Sora, the husband told 10 people, he addressed a group of 10 people, Kisu get lishti, write a get for my wife. So what is the status of all these 10 people? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shnayim Mishamedim, he really only meant that there should be 2 Edom on the get that will validate the get. The other 8 people, he's just making a t'nai in the get to make his wife's life miserable. He'll pick the 8 men or the 10 men whose wife would be most uncomfortable getting a get in front of, and those are the ones who he's going to force to have to sign on the get because he wants to torture his wife. But again, Rabbi Yochanan said, even though he said he wants 10, he didn't mean that he wants 10 Edom. He really meant only he wants 2 Edom and the other 8 are at 9. For Shlokish Amar Kulam Mishamedim, they're all Edom. What's the difference if they're signing as Eidim or if they're signing just because of a Tnai, the Gemara will offer three different nafkaminas. But first, let's get clear what the case was. Hey Chedami, what exactly did this man say when he instructed these 10 people? If he didn't say the kolchem, he just said tnu get leishti, but he didn't speak out kolchem, each and every one of you, there, for sure it's not an issue. Because what Nan we learned, Amar la Sarah kisu get leishti, if someone addresses 10 people, he says, write a get for my wife, he just means from here, from this pool, they should do it, but not that everybody has to be involved. And therefore, echad kaisid, one could write it, ushnayim kaisid, and the other two sign. Ella, the kshail that we have here, if it's a Tanai or if it's Edis, is the Omer Lahu Kulchem. He specifically said, I want each and every one of you to be signed on the get. So the question is, does he want them signed on the get as Edim, or does he want them just signed on the get as a Tanai? What's the difference? My Beinayu. So Ika Beinayu, the Chasum Beitrei Minayu B'yoyme. V'inich Mikan V'rasar Yom. What if only 2 Edim signed on that day, and the other 2 Edim signed 10 days later? So let's think, we know there's a machlokes here, right? Rish Lakish told us that according to Reb Shimon, it would be allowed. Why would it be allowed? It would not be allowed, because according to Rish Lakish, even Reb Shimon only allowed Eidim to sign a day later, but not 10 days later. So according to Rish Lakish, if 2 Eidim signed on the right day, and the rest of them signed 10 days later, if they're all Eidim, this get is possible. Because even Reb Shimon, who allowed you to stretch it out, but only 1 day, not 10 days. But if it's just a Tanai, then only 2 Eidim are on this get, and those 2 Eidim signed on the right day. The other Eidim are just signing because of the Tanai. They don't have to sign on the day that the get was written. But Mandam Mishum Tanai will be kosher, because the Eidim who signed later are not Eidim. Umandam Mishum Eidim Pasul, because they signed too late, even according to Reb Shimon. Inami, I'll tell you another difference. What if one of these Eidim was a Karav or Apostle? The halach is, if a group of Eidim come together to sign on a star or a get, and then one of them is Apostle or Eid, the whole star is possible. He disqualifies everybody in the group. So the Mandam Mishum Tanai, if it's a Tanai, kosher. Why? Because we're going to say that the Eidim that he meant to be Eidim were not the Kroivim. And the Kroivim he meant to be just as part of the Tanai, but not because of the Eidim. However, if you hold Mishum Eidim, it will be possible. Why? Because one of the Eidim are possible, they possible them all. Mandam Mishum Eidim is possible. Zok to Gemara. Let's drill down. You're saying if the first 2 Eidim, if 2 Eidim are possible, if it's a Tanai, it doesn't possible the rest of the Eidim. The Gemara qualifies that. Ichasam betchila karv possible. What would happen if the Karv and Puzzle didn't sign anywhere on the get? They signed the first 2, which typically the first 2 would be the Eidim. Amr la kasher, Amr la Puzzle. There are those who hold it would be kosher, because you just ignore those. Those just are part of the Tanai, and the real Eidim would be later. But Amr la Puzzle, there are those who say that even if you hold it's only a Tanai, but if the first 2 signatories are Puzzle, then the get is Puzzle, even if it's a Tanai. Amr la kasher, Tanai. The svar that it's kosher is because it's a night, and we'll say that those 2 first names are not the Eidim. Amr l'Apostle, also l'chluvi b'shtaris to Alma. We're afraid that if you're going to allow this get to be kosher because of the Eidim that signed lower down, people aren't going to know that it's the Eidim that signed lower down that's making this get into a get. They'll think that we could rely on Eidim to sign a get that are kroivim or that are apostle. And then they'll think that all stories can be signed by Kroivim and Apostle, and therefore we passel this get. Beautiful. There was a gentleman, the Amalu Lasar, he told 10 people, Kisvu get leishti, I want you all to write a get for my wife. Chasoim bei trei minayu b'yamei. I want 2 of you to sign on the day that we write the get. The other 8, Mikan Vadasar Yomim, I want you to sign on a later day. Now the question is this get going to be kosher? Also, the Kamedia B'Shuv Levi. They asked Rabbi B'Shuv Levi to decide. So we know, according to the Talakam of our Mishnah, for sure it's possible. But Rabbi B'Shuv Levi said we could rely on Rabbi Shimon, Amrle, he said, Kedai, and let's turn the daf over to daf Yutes Amud Aleph. Kedai hu Rab Shimon, we could rely on Rab Shimon, lisma chalav b'shasatcha. Here the husband's gone, we need to make this get kosher, and we'll say that the get is kosher because Rab Shimon holds that you could sign later. Correct the Gemara, it depends on how you understood Rab Shimon. We just had a machlokes, and Reish Lakish said, Reish Lakish, lo hichshir Rab Shimon al alter. Even Rab Shimon who allows the Edom to sign the day after the get was written, that's only 1 day later, not 10 days later. So how could you, Rab Shuban Levi, rely on Rab Shimon to be matter this get? According to Reish Lakish, even according to Rab Shimon, this get is not going to be good. Zok Gemara, maybe Rabbi Shuban Levi held like Rabbi Yochanan, who understood Rab Shimon, to say that even 10 days later, Rab Shimon holds it's a kosher get. Frank Gemara, if you're going to hold like Rabbi Yochanan, then you don't even have to come on to Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Yochanan, Shnai Mishum Edim, V'chulu Mishum Tnai. Didn't Rabbi Yochanan say that when someone does such a thing, he only means to appoint 2 as the Edim, and the rest are Tnai? And 2 of the Edim already signed right away that day. The rest of the people who signed late, there's no problem at all. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, you don't need Rabbi Shimon. And if you need Rabbi Shimon, well, then it's going according to Reish Lakish, and then it shouldn't be allowed. Dr. Gemara, Bahik Reish Lakish Virlei, Rabbi Shuban Levi held like Reish Lakish that when someone wants 10 people to sign, they're all Edim. But Lagabi Rabbi Shimon's psak of how much you could predate a star, he holds like Rabbi Yochanan that you could even sign the star up to 10 days later. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we finished Daf Yudches. Chai, we should have a wonderful week, a good tavach, a gebench tavach, a mazel tavach. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Good.